As much as I miss amusement arcades, let's face it, in the late 1980s these were dangerous places. If you didn't want to get smashed all around the shop just trying to play your favourite game, then sometimes you would be better off waiting for the home conversion. Hi everyone, welcome back to another 8-Bit Wars. I'm your host Swaney, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Data East coin-op Midnight Resistance. Now this game was released in 1989. It's said to be a follow-up to Heavy Barrel, and I think it's the second game by Data East that used SNK's rotary joystick system. The rotary joystick system you'll probably remember best on the first game that it was used on, which was Akari Warriors. You spun the top of the joystick around to change direction of where you were aiming, and this works exactly the same way. Obviously it's a platform 2D game, it's not a bird's eye view like Akari Warriors was. But yeah, the control system is exactly the same. Now I'm going to be totally honest with you, I'm not the biggest fan of this arcade game. It was okay, it was enjoyable, but it wasn't great. I found the home conversions more interesting at the time. Although I'd only played the coin-op a few times, the coin-op just did not grab me. I thought it looked rather bland, some of the animation was a bit dodgy while the character was running along, especially when you start using the rotary joystick system.
Pick a weapon.
Your gun, you know, you can aim in every direction, but your legs just seem, I don't know, if you look at that animation there, it just, to me, there's something very dodgy about it. Look at that, when he's running backwards, it's just,
Power up.
yeah, it's a bit odd. Anyway, that's the storeroom. Break in there, you collect some new weapons and ammo with the keys that you're picking up through killing the bad guys. So yeah, the first couple of levels are pretty run-of-the-mill stuff. You've got the same tank boss, which we're about to take on again here. Here it comes. Some of the sound effects and even some of the graphics are ripped directly from RoboCop, which is another Data East game. Notice the grenades, when that goes, exactly the same as the grenade sound effects in RoboCop. Also the smoke that was coming out of the tank just then is exactly the same smoke that comes out of Ed 209 on RoboCop. So it seemed like to me they were cutting corners. Don't get me wrong, the graphics are perfectly fine and it's entirely up to them if they want to reuse certain things from their games, but it just seems a bit sloppy. But it's still a playable game. So anyway, that's the arcade version. Let's see what the others are like. Okay guys, so this is the ZX Spectrum 128K version. Take a listen to this title music. I honestly think it sounds better than the music on the arcade version. One thing I will say also is that for once the music on this is up there with the Commodore 64 version. Okay, so graphically, take a look at that. It's very cartoony compared to the arcade. Now I know that Malcolm and a few other people are probably going to think, oh my god, it's not like the arcade version, it's cartoony, it's Metal Slug. Well, it is cartoony, and yeah, I guess it does look a bit like Metal Slug, but this came a lot earlier than Metal Slug was ever released. Anyway, the reason I believe that the graphic artist went for this look was because the ZX Spectrum obviously had problems with the colour, in that the characters take on the colour of the background. when you have detailed graphics that are quite small, it would have been a nightmare to see what was going on, where the bullets were coming from, etc. This way, with the dark outlines around the characters and around the bullets, and the enemy's bullets are all multicoloured, it just makes things a lot easier to be able to tell where the firepower is coming from, etc. It just makes it, you know, a lot less intense and easier to work out what's going on. And also, the animation on the main character sprite, look at the legs, it's better than the arcade version. Now, I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me, but the arcade version, the legs on the main character just did not look right, and this looks better. I'm not saying that you know, all the graphics are better than the arcade version, obviously they're not, but the animation is better in places. Okay, so level 2, as you can see, I've picked the freeway and the shower weapons. To my advantage, it makes the game a hell of a lot easier. One thing I will say they got wrong with this is that when you jump it feels very floaty. It doesn't feel quite right. Also, as you can see, the scrolling, it uses a push scroll. And, oh damn, you didn't see that bullet, overdoing it with shower effects. Yeah, the scrolling isn't great. You know, it's not a continuous smooth scroll like it was on the arcade. Basically you get so far into the screen and the screen scrolls a bit and then a bit more. It's not the greatest system, but playability wise I do think this holds up really well. Certainly on par with the arcade version. Obviously with all the home versions there was a problem because of the controllers. You know, we've not got the rotary system on a ZX Spectrum, Amstrad or Commodore 64. But I think on all versions the coders handled the controls really well. It all works off of one button on a joystick. You know, you don't have to press space, although you could have that option. So yeah, I think the controls on all the home versions works really well. Right, so you've seen the ZX Spectrum version, let's move on to the Amstrad CPC. Okay, so on to the Amstrad CPC version. So, similar title music, using the same chip as the ZX Spectrum 128K. For some reason it's at a slightly different pitch. Don't think I quite like the music on this version as much as I do on the Spectrum. It's slightly muffled, or there's something not quite right about that, but it's still very good. Just what you get used to, I guess. Right, so onto the game itself. And this is where things start falling down rapidly. As you can hear, there is no in-game music. It's using the AY chip for the sound effects, which isn't a bad thing. Graphically, as you can see, it's a monochrome version of the ZX Spectrum's graphics, but they are lacking the masking that was on the ZX Spectrum. For those who don't know what masking is, it's basically the outline around the sprites, which make them a little easier to see on the ZX Spectrum version. Without them, the legs tend to, because they're black as well as a lot of the backgrounds, they tend to merge with the backgrounds, making it slightly hard to see what's going on. Gameplay wise, exactly the same to the ZX Spectrum really, apart from it's running a few frames slower. It certainly feels like it anyway. But yeah, it's not a bad port, but where it lacks the music, I guess it was the same for 48K Spectrum owners, you lose so much atmosphere with that soundtrack. It's such a shame. I'm not too sure why it wasn't included in the Amstrad version, because you know the music had already been written for the AY chip. That's what featured on the 128K Spectrum version. So why it was dropped, I can only put it down to memory constraints. Other things that are slightly different, you've got the scoreboards on the side there, and your weapons on the left hand side. Other than that, it's virtually the same. Sound effects are obviously different because they're coming from the AY chip. It's also a multi-load, so I've got the disc version here, that's why there's a bit of a break between the level. But as you can see, just because it lacks the colour of the ZX Spectrum version, it gives it a very different feel. Thankfully the scrolling's ever so slightly smoother, but again it still uses that awful push scroll system. It's not like the arcades. Also, again with the jump, it's still very floaty. Yeah, I'm really running out of things to say for this version. It's definitely the weakest of the 8-bit ports, without a doubt. We'll just try and get onto the tunnelling section, just to show you how it looks compared to the arcade and Spectrum version, just quickly. I think we'll leave it here, guys. As you can see, it could have been a lot better. It's a shame because we've seen what the Amstrad's capable of with Grisel. That was a fantastic conversion on the Amstrad. Very colourful, lovely animated graphics, and this, unfortunately, it's a Spectrum port, and more should have been done with it. And so it's on to the Commodore 64 version. Guys, yet again, take a listen to this music. Just like the ZX Spectrum version, I think that the Commodore 64 version of the music sounds a lot better than it did on the arcade. It's the same tune, but it's just the sound chip, the SID chip, produces it so well. It just seems to suit the 8-bit machines better than it did on the arcade. Again, that's personal preference, but I just love 8-bit music. Right, it's a multi-load game, so it's just loading up the first level as I've just been playing the game, so I can quick go of it. So yeah, as you can see, the graphics, they're not as detailed. Some nice scrolling. It's lacking the Jeep, which was at the start of the arcade game and the other versions. But generally this version plays a lot more like the arcade game than the ZX Spectrum and Amstrad versions. They've definitely gone for more of the arcade feel with this version. Sadly it seems that the Commodore isn't up to displaying too many sprites at once. You'll get 2 or 3 at most. Also, when you drop your keys, instead of having keys scatter all over the screen, you just get one key with a number above it, displaying how many keys you've dropped, which seems a bit odd. There's also quite a bit of flicker during the boss battles, as you'll notice here. Part of the back of the tank is missing, and then a lot of the time, there we go, the guy's legs are flickering. What I will say yet again is that the sprite, I believe, is better animated on this version than it is in the arcade. Oops, wasn't meant to do that. Yes, although the background graphics are losing a bit of detail compared to the other versions, certain sections of it look great. The storeroom, for instance, looks superb on this version, but you'll notice once we get on to level 2, some of the backgrounds, especially the flooring, is lacking detail. Also, one thing I will quickly mention is the storeroom. On the arcades, you get random weapons. On the ZX Spectrum and Amstrad versions, each time you go into the storeroom, it's the same weapons every time. The Commodore 64 version is just like the arcade in that they are random. So it really does play a lot more like the arcade game. That being said, which version do I prefer? I've got to admit, I'm really... it's such a hard choice. As I said at the beginning of the video, I'm not the biggest fan of the game from the arcades, and this plays very much like it. I prefer this to the arcade version, but I kind of prefer the playability of the Spectrum version, although it isn't as close a conversion, so it's going to be a hard decision. I'm really not too sure what I'm going to pick. Let's keep on playing and see what the rest of this level has to offer. If I get that far, because I'm really doing badly on this version. It does seem a little tougher. Maybe it's a little faster. Again, there's another feature that wasn't in the Spectrum version, but was on the arcade. It's just little things like the cover on the lid there. You have to blow that away before you can climb down a ladder. On the Spectrum and Amstrad versions, it simply isn't there. Some really nice crawling animation here, which didn't look too good on the Spectrum, but it works really well on the Commodore. This version does seem to control ever so slightly different. Still works fairly well though. So, what am I going to choose, guys? I'm really not too sure. I honestly prefer the playability of the Spectrum version, but this version is a lot closer to the arcade. What shall it be?